In the middle of intense personal suffering, when really bad things are happening to you, why should you turn to God rather than turning away from God? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. In the last video, I shared about my last 9 months that I've experienced intense anxiety and depression. And I used that to explore the existential problem of evil, which is, how could God exist if this evil thing is happening to me personally? And we saw in that video that really this is just another instance of the evidential problem of evil. And I believe we've also seen a proper response to this, which is that God, being an infinite intellect, would have reasons for allowing evils that I wouldn't know yet, possibly some reasons that I couldn't even conceive of, possibly. And yet this may not seem all that satisfactory. At my worst, this was several months. Right now, I'm still going through anxiety and depression, but it's not nearly as bad as it was when it first happened. And at the worst, I had thoughts of suicide. It was, just really gnarly depression. And multiple times I begged God to stop it. I begged God in Jesus' name, right? I said, please heal me, take this away. And he didn't. I had every willing person that I knew of pray over me, and it never went away. And this led me to the question, maybe God has good reasons for my suffering, but if he's not going to answer me when I pray in worst of times, then why should I pray in the first place? Why believe in God? Why turn to God? Why believe in God if he's not answering the prayers when I need him the most? Now, the question might sound strange. It might sound like, wait, you're saying that you're going to disbelieve because you don't like something about God, right? You agree that God could have reasons that you couldn't know for allowing the evil that you're going through, and yet you're just going to disbelieve because you don't want to? Can you really do that? And I'd say personally, yes, you can. When I was in high school, I became an atheist junior year in high school. And it was not for the best of reasons. It was because I desperately wanted to have sex and do drugs, to be honest. And I was going to an Episcopalian school, and they had an atheist teaching the philosophy class, which was insane. You would think that a Christian school would have, a guy that believes teaching stuff, about existence of God and everything. But this guy convinced me that if I disbelieved in God, I could do whatever I wanted to. So I thought, oh, dude, I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to reject the existence of, I no longer believe in God. And now I can do whatever I want to. So it may sound crazy, but it absolutely that absolutely was what happened with me. And I'll call this practical atheism. When you choose to reject God's existence, not because you have adequate reasons to reject his existence, but because you just don't want to believe in him. There's something about him that you don't like. And this brings us to the practical atheism question in the existential problem of evil, which is, when I'm going through intense suffering and I see that God is not answering my prayers, why should I turn to God rather than turning away from God? Why not just disbelieve in God in the first place? So in this video, I'll go through a number of reasons why I chose to turn towards God rather than turn away from him. And you can, decide what you want to. The first was that I think God sort of holds all the cards here. We all want to be happy, right? And I think we're sort of built so that we can only be truly happy in God. And here's what I mean. This is called there's an argument for the existence of God from happiness, and I won't get into that as much, but this is, a sort of a truncated version of it, if you will, which is that we all desire to be happy. When you ask anybody why they do anything, they might give you some reasons, but ultimately they'll give you the reason, because I want to be happy. Why do you go to work? Because I need money. Why do you want money? Because I want to buy stuff. Why do you want to buy stuff? Because I want to be happy. Why do you want to be happy? Because I want to be happy, right? That's sort of like the end, right? That is the goal. And so we all want to be happy, and it seems like nothing in the world ever satisfies that desire for happiness. When you get whatever it is that you want, it'll satiate you for a short period of time, But ultimately you get bored of it, right? Or not, maybe not bored of it. I don't know. Like, I have a surfboard that I really like. And when I first got it, it was just mind blowing. I was so stoked on it. And I still like it a lot. It's just not something that every day I'm like, oh, I can't believe I have this surfboard. It's so amazing. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't comfort me or anything like that. So it brought me a great deal of happiness, but it starts to diminish in happiness as you get along. And ultimately you start to get bored and you want a different kind of surfboard. And anything that you really desire, give you enough of it. If you like cars, let's say I gave you an infinite amount of cars. Ultimately, you'd get bored of them, right? Like at some point, you'd be like, is this all we got? Just cars? That's all it's all about? Or even like sex. Like, just say you could have as much sex as you wanted with anybody that you wanted to, right? Ultimately, I think you would see it like it's empty, right? Ultimately, you would feel like I'm just having sex with everybody and that's it. All these things are good things in the world, and yet they only have a limited ability to make us happy, and we're never truly satisfied, right? So it seems like we have an unlimited desire for happiness, and yet there's only limited things in the world, limited goods. So we desire really an unlimited good, a thing that does not get old, right? A thing that only gets better the more that you look at it. And the only unlimited being in the world would be God. The only possibility for an unlimited being would be God, who, being all good and being infinite at the same time, would be an infinite good thing. The more you look at him, the better it gets, right? You could just, throughout eternity, never get old, right? It never gets old. It's like C.S. Lewis once said, it's like the best book you ever read, and it never ends, and each chapter is better than the last. Well, he was talking about heaven, but like that would be like being in the presence of God. It seems like that is the sort of happiness that we're geared towards, and God is the only thing that can satiate us in that way. So I think one of the reasons why I chose to turn to God is because I think, he's got kind of all the cards here. He's the only thing that's going to truly make me happy. So I want to be happy. So I'm going to follow God. Of course, I wasn't happy in those moments, though. Like in the moments of depression, I was very unhappy. So what about those moments? What about the times in life when, you are unhappy and you could live a life? I mean, I lived for an extended period of time in intense unhappiness. And some people have had to live. My buddy, Patrick Steele, he lived for most of his life as a quadriplegic in a lot of pain. And so he didn't have the circumstances that bring about the kind of happiness that a lot of us enjoy. A lot of us, we have healthy bodies, we have, a roof over our head, and we have comfort, and we can enjoy a lot of stuff. And that brings some modicum of happiness. But for some people, like my friend Patrick, he could never be comfortable, right? He was always in some kind of pain. He just spent his life like that. What about that? What about when you have periods of time, or possibly your entire life, where you can't be happy? In those cases, I think, obviously the true happiness I'm looking at would be, happiness in the other life. It wouldn't be happiness in these 80 years that you get. It would be an infinite amount of time that you'd be happy, but compared to, just 80 years on this earth. But even on this earth, even if you can't be happy, I think that you can still have joy. So here's the second reason I chose to turn to God. Happiness is a thing that we have, and it's temporary on this planet, on this earth. And it all depends on our circumstances, like I said. But joy is not a thing that's dependent on your external circumstances. Joy is a thing that you have when you know that the things that are happening to you have some kind of meaning or purpose. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, noted that the people who survived that most horrible of circumstances were the people who believed that who saw that the things that they were going through had some kind of purpose to it. So it has some kind of meaning to it. The people that didn't believe that, or that couldn't see it, they never made it. They just couldn't survive that. So yeah, I think that joy, the ability to see the purpose in your suffering, even through your suffering, but also through your good times as well, is something that is even better than happiness, because you can't lose it. It doesn't depend on your external circumstances. When is it the case that we have purpose? How is it the case that we could look at events and say that they have some kind of meaning or some kind of purpose to it? Let's say we're walking through a forest and I see a rock. I pick it up and I say, who made this rock? And you look around and you're like, nobody. It's just there. And I say, okay. Well, what's its purpose? What's its purpose? There's no purpose. It's just there, right? But now instead, let's say I'm walking around and I see an AirPod case, and somebody made this thing, right? And I say, what's its purpose? It's to recharge AirPods. And I know that's the purpose because somebody made the AirPods with that purpose. In other words, a thing doesn't have purpose unless it is made by something by an intelligent agent with that purpose in mind. In the same way, the events of our lives will not be purposeful unless God has somehow ordained them in such a way that they would be purposeful. So another reason that I think we should turn to God, or I decided to turn to God, was because I didn't want my suffering to be meaningless. I didn't want it to be pointless, right? I wanted to have joy. I wanted to look back and say, I went through all this stuff, but it wasn't for nothing. It was for some reason. I knew God in the very beginning already had it planned out, the good things that would come from it. And I think there have been great things that have come from it. I've been able to be a lot more empathetic to people who have gone through this kind of thing, and to people who are going through it right now. I can definitely say I understand what it's like. I've been able to consider the problem of evil in, I think, a legitimate way now, whereas before I was really, I'd never really had anything all that bad happen to me. Now I've gone through the suffering, I know what it's like. So I can really talk about the problem of evil from a first-person perspective rather than just from an academic way. So I think there have been some really good things that have come from it. I also think when I decided to acquiesce to the fact that God had some purpose to all the suffering that I was going through, that things just got a lot better. When I was, I didn't want there to be a purpose to it at first, because I thought, if there was purpose to it, then that means that I should go through it, and I don't want to go through it. So I fought against it having any purpose. I wanted it to be something that would go away really quickly. But when I finally just acquiesced and said, okay, God's got some reason for it. I don't know what that reason is, but I know that he's good. I know that he loves me, and I'm going to go with it, whatever that is. Once I acquiesced in that way, it got so much better. Like the suffering just was not nearly as bad. And that's something, pro tip for you guys who have to go through some serious suffering. Drop the idea that you are owed happiness in this life. If you have something really bad like this happen and it's prolonged suffering, you're going to have these ideas like, I don't deserve this. This isn't the real me. This isn't really my life. I won't accept this. And it only makes things way worse if you're all worried about your rights and, this is infringement on my rights. It's just going to make your life way, way more miserable. Instead, I recommend you just lean into your pain. I know that sounds awful. And I don't mean be resigned to your pain. You don't want that. You don't want to be just like, well, it's just going to be happening, like you don't want that attitude either. But instead, just accept that it's part of God's good purposes, and you're just not aware of what that purpose is just yet. So yeah, accepting it doesn't mean resignation to it. If there's a way that you can get out of that pain, then God's probably providing that way. So you should definitely take that way. I also think that when we know there's some kind of purpose to our suffering, we can have hope, a special kind of hope too. Ancients denigrated hope. They used to think that it was just wishful thinking, and that there is a type of hope that is just like, oh my gosh, I wish this really happens, fingers crossed. Like, for example, if I were to say, I hope the Saints win this week, I'm just saying, like, fingers crossed. But if I say my hope is in the Saints defense, I'm saying that I trust in the Saints defense, and I'm saying that for good reasons. So that kind of hope is not just wishful thinking. That is a rational kind of a hope. And that's the kind of hope I'm talking about when I say that we trust in God's purposes. If we know God has some kind of purpose, we can say, I don't know what it's going to be like on the other end, but I know it's going to be better. And I know that it's going to be for my good. And I know it's not going to be pointless. So that's a kind of hope that you don't have if you turn away from God. If you turn away from God, then all your suffering is just for no reason whatsoever. And I definitely didn't want that. I didn't want to waste a bit of my, if I was going to go through that suffering, if I was going to go through that hell, I wanted every ounce of that suffering to count, to go into, I don't know what kind of bank account. I don't really know what I'm thinking about, but accounting, but I wanted it to be for some reason. I didn't want it to be totally pointless. Another thing that I didn't really know at the time, but I just kind of had to buy and trust that it was the case, was that God gives you strength. So here's what I mean. Like, we are limited beings, and there's only so much that we can handle. But there's no theoretical limit on the amount of suffering that can be endued on a person. So it stands to reason that there's a breaking point for everyone. You might be able to do it on your own. You might be able to get through certain suffering on your own. You could probably do better than I did in my worst times. But there's going to be some point in time where you come to a place where you can't make it. And once you come to that place, you're going to have to reach beyond your own resources, beyond human resources. And before I went through this, I couldn't say that this was actually true because I didn't really know. I mean, people told me, but I wouldn't have known. But when you turn to God, he does provide those resources, even if he doesn't take you out of the suffering. Like I told you at the very beginning of this, I prayed many times that God would just heal me, and he didn't do that, but he did sustain me through all of the suffering. It didn't really feel like it at the time. When I was in my most depressed mode, it definitely felt like he had abandoned me. And that's actually an experience that people in the Bible have had. The psalmist had it. Jesus even had it at some point at his, on the crucifixion. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me here to die like this? So I definitely think that you will feel that at times, and yet he still does strengthen you through it. And you look back and you say, wow, I don't think I could have made that. I don't think I could have made that on my own. And thankfully, God gives you the strength. I should warn you though, if you're looking to God for strength, or even if you're looking for hope and for purpose and all those kinds of things, God provides those things, but he only has this relation to you on his own terms, right? You don't get to determine the terms on which you relate to God. And the way he's chosen to relate to us is through Jesus Christ as revealed in the Bible. So 1 Timothy 5 says, "For there's one mediator between God and man, the man Jesus Christ." So if you want the strength that God gives you, you have to go through Jesus. In John 14:6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man gets to the Father except through me." So you have to go through Jesus. And the way to do that is to make him Lord of your life. If you reject Jesus, you've rejected God and his purposes and his strength and all that stuff. And again, I realize you may not want to hear that. If so, I'm sorry, but that's just, I don't want you to be searching for God's strength and wondering why am I not getting it? That's why you're not getting it if you're rejecting God in that way. I hope that makes sense. That's all I have for the existential problem of evil, and in this case, the practical atheist question. I know you're going to go through suffering. That everybody does, right? We all go through suffering at some point in our life. Somebody dies that you love very much, or you have some kind of, disease or anxiety and depression or whatever it is. You're going to have some kind of bad thing happen in your life. And when that happens, I really hope what I've told you just now helps. And please let me know if you have any questions on anything on anything about this video, but really on anything in suffering. And I hope I can help. I don't know. I've definitely seen a whole lot. And I'd like to be a resource for you guys, for anybody is suffering. I don't want anybody to have to be alone in that. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. And that's all I got. Adios.